Morning light spilled through the white curtains, painting soft stripes of gold across our bed. I stretched lazily, letting the quiet hum of the shower fill the room. It was peaceful. Or it should have been. I started straightening the sheets, tucking corners the way I always did, when something shiny caught my eye near Ethan's pillow. At first, I thought it was just a stray earring, but no, it was a bracelet. I picked it up, holding it to the light. Gold, delicate, clearly expensive, the kind of piece I would have remembered owning. My stomach tightened as I traced the tiny engravings along its edge. LM. 2 letters, but they hit me like a slap. I don't know why, but my hands felt suddenly cold. That gut instinct, the one I'd ignored too many times before, whispered that this wasn't some innocent mix-up. The bathroom door opened just as I was turning the bracelet in my hand. Ethan stepped out, towel around his waist, his hair dripping onto the floor. He smiled, easy and charming like always. I held it up. Ethan, what's this? He didn't flinch. What do you mean? It's yours. I stared at him, frowning. Mine? I've never seen it before. He chuckled softly, too softly. You probably just forgot. You have so much jewelry. His words hung in the air, light and careless, but something about them scraped at me. I may forget where I put my keys or leave a cup of tea to grow cold on the counter, but I don't forget owning jewelry. I could feel the temperature in the room shift, though the morning sun still streamed warm across the floor. I may forget where I put things, Ethan, I said quietly, but I don't forget owning them. He rolled his eyes, that dismissive little gesture I'd learned to hate, and grabbed his shirt from the chair. You're overthinking again, Soph. Just like that. Like he could sweep my doubt under the rug with one sentence. I watched him leave the room, the scent of his cologne following behind him, sharp and bitter. For a second, I almost believed maybe I was overreacting. Almost. But the bracelet still sat in my palm, its weight far heavier than gold should ever feel. I turned it over again, tracing those engraved letters as if they could explain themselves. LM. Who was she? Why here? And why near his pillow? The questions started buzzing, unstoppable, filling every corner of the silence he'd left behind. I didn't know the answers yet, but one thing was certain. Something had shifted. Something I couldn't unsee. I sat on the edge of the bed, still holding that tiny piece of evidence like it might burn a hole through my skin. The shower steam lingered in the air, curling around me, thick and heavy. Outside, I could hear the faint chirping of birds, so ordinary, so cruelly normal. But nothing about that morning felt normal anymore. The bracelet glimmered in my hand, silent and accusing, a stranger's secret that had found its way into my marriage. I replayed his expression over and over, the ease in his voice, the way his eyes didn't even flicker when he lied. How many times had I mistaken his calm for honesty? How long had I been accepting half-truths wrapped in charm? It was terrifying, realizing how little I actually knew the man I shared a bed with. I'd spent years trusting him without question, but now every memory felt like a puzzle missing its real picture. By the time I placed the bracelet on my nightstand, something inside me had shifted. Doubt had turned into quiet determination. Maybe he thought I'd let it go, like before. But this time, I wouldn't. I needed to know where that bracelet came from, and whose initials were carved so carefully into it. As the sun rose higher, so did my resolve. Tomorrow, I'd start finding answers. By afternoon, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The bracelet had burned a space into my mind, each glint of gold reminding me of the lie Ethan fed me that morning. So I slipped it into my purse and headed to Maria's shop, my usual jeweler, and one of the few people who could read me like an open book. The moment I stepped inside, the soft chime of the bell and the smell of polished wood greeted me. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. Maria smiled when she saw me. Sophie, what brings you in today? I forced a smile, holding out the bracelet like it was something casual, something meaningless. Just wanted to get this cleaned. It's been a while. She took it carefully, her eyes lighting up immediately. "Oh, this is gorgeous. Custom engravings, too. LMC?" My heart dropped. She said the initials out loud. And just like that, my worst suspicion stopped being a whisper and became real. I leaned closer, pretending to admire it. "Do you happen to know what brand it is?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Maria nodded. "Yes, this is from Luxe Boutique, limited edition, only a few sold last season." Her words echoed like a countdown inside my head. Limited edition, few sold. My name wasn't on any of those lists, but I had a feeling whose might be. I thanked Maria, forcing another smile as she wrapped the bracelet in a small velvet pouch. My fingers trembled just enough for her to notice, but she said nothing, only gave me that knowing look women share when words aren't needed. I left the shop with the pouch in hand and a storm building inside me. The sunlight outside felt too bright, the city too loud, every sound scraping against my nerves. My mind wouldn't stop looping through her words. Luxe Boutique, limited edition. When I got home, Ethan was on the couch, scrolling through his phone like a man without a care in the world. The contrast was almost unbearable. I stood in the doorway for a moment, studying him. The man I once thought I could read like a map. Now he just looked like a stranger in familiar clothes. "I stopped by Luxe Boutique today," I said, setting my purse down. He froze mid-scroll, then slowly looked up, smiling that fake, lazy smile. "Why?" he asked, too casual. I let the question hang in the air, savoring his discomfort. "To learn that your gift to me was actually sold to a woman named Lily Moore." His smile faltered. "Does that name sound familiar?" I could almost see the panic flicker behind his eyes before he hit it again. "You're digging into things that don't matter," he said sharply. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but from clarity. "No, Ethan," I said softly. "I'm uncovering things you thought didn't show." He stood up fast, his jaw tight, eyes darting away like the truth might be hiding somewhere on the floor. "I'm going out," he muttered, grabbing his keys. "I need space." The door slammed before I could even respond. I stayed there, frozen, the echo of that slam spreading through the house like an aftershock. For a moment, I just stared at the bracelet in my hand, that quiet, golden lie that had started to unravel everything. The living room was still, except for the soft ticking of the wall clock. Each tick felt like a reminder of time wasted, of trust broken. I sank onto the couch, gripping the bracelet tighter, feeling its cold edges dig into my palm. I thought about every night he came home late, every vague story about work drinks and client dinners. Each one now sounded like a carefully crafted performance. How many times had I applauded it? By the time the sun began to set, my sadness had cooled into something sharper. Focus. If Ethan wanted space, he could have it. I needed answers more than I needed peace. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to look for them. Because deep down, I already knew. Once you start seeing the cracks, you can never unsee them. And I was ready to follow them wherever they led. Over the next few days, Ethan's presence in the house became like a shadow, faint, cold, and always slipping away. He left earlier for work, came home later, and barely spoke at all. Each time he walked through the door, I could smell unfamiliar perfume on his jacket, faint but distinct. My instincts screamed, but I stayed quiet. I smiled when he smiled, asked nothing, and waited. Because now, silence was my strategy. I started watching patterns, his texts, his habits, even the way he lingered near his phone when it buzzed. One evening, while he showered, I noticed his tablet blinking on the nightstand. We both used it for groceries and bills, so I tapped it open. What I found wasn't a list or a receipt, it was a message. "Can't stop thinking about last night. L." My throat tightened. I took a slow breath, fighting the urge to throw the tablet across the room. Instead, I snapped a screenshot, sent it quietly to myself, and stared at the glowing screen until my reflection blurred. Then an idea started forming, calm, deliberate, and dangerous in its precision. I opened his phone, copied the message, and typed back, "I can't either. When can we meet again?" My pulse pounded as I hit send. Minutes later, the reply came through. "Same hotel, room 308, Friday night." My hand didn't even shake. My heart, though, burned steady with something new. Purpose. That night, when Ethan came home, I greeted him like nothing had changed. I even asked about his day, laughed at his half-hearted jokes, and served his favorite dinner. It was almost frightening how easily I could play the part. He had no idea that I'd already seen the truth, that I could picture her face even without meeting her. "I was thinking we could order takeout Friday," I said, casually pouring wine into his glass. "Maybe relax, just us." He didn't even look up. "Can't. Work dinner." His voice was flat, automatic. I forced a small, understanding smile. "Of course. Don't work too hard." Inside, my mind was already racing, rearranging plans, constructing my own quiet trap. Every word he spoke became another thread in the web I was spinning. I let him believe I was still tangled in his lies, the loyal wife who never doubts, never questions, never checks the tablet. But that night, as he fell asleep beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, tracing invisible patterns in the dark. My fingers brushed against the bracelet on the nightstand, that cursed piece of gold that started everything. And I promised myself something. I wouldn't cry. Not yet. Tears were for endings. This wasn't over. Not until I decided it was. The following days moved in slow motion, every hour pulling me closer to Friday night. I went about my routine as if life were normal. Work, errands, polite smiles at neighbors, all while a quiet storm built beneath my calm exterior. I studied every move Ethan made, every excuse, every late meeting. Each one confirmed what I already knew. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. That made it easier. Clarity always does. Thursday evening, he packed an overnight bag for work. He didn't even see the faint smile that crossed my lips when he thought I wasn't looking. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the explosive way I used to be. No, this time my anger was cold, methodical, almost elegant. Revenge, I realized, didn't always need to scream. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it waited behind a hotel door with a camera in hand. When I kissed him goodnight, pretending to be tired, I felt strangely calm. Like a performer moments before the curtain rises, heart steady, lines memorized, purpose clear. I'd already booked the room across from 308. I knew exactly where I'd stand, what I'd say, and when to walk away. He thought he was staging a secret affair. But Friday? Friday would be my show. Friday arrived dressed in deceit and silence. Ethan kissed my cheek before leaving, his cologne lingering longer than his words. I watched him go, the sound of the front door closing marking the beginning of something irreversible. By the afternoon, I was ready, not to plead, not to cry, but to witness the truth unfold in its rawest form. I slipped into a black dress, not the one he liked, but the one that made me feel untouchable. At the hotel, the air was heavy with perfume and pretense, laughter spilling from the bar, heels clicking against marble floors. I checked in under a different name, the same kind of lie he'd been living. The room was directly across from 308, just as I'd planned. From my narrow view through the cracked door, I saw the hallway, pristine and quiet. My phone was ready in my hand, camera set, heart steady. Minutes stretched like hours until I saw him, Ethan, in his neatly pressed shirt, adjusting his tie like a man about to close a deal, not destroy a marriage. Then she appeared. Lily Moore. The initials I'd memorized in gold were now moving, breathing, laughing softly beside my husband. The bracelet rested in my purse, waiting for its encore. Watching them together felt strange. Not like heartbreak, but confirmation. The kind that hurts and heals at once. I waited 15 long minutes after they disappeared into room 308. My pulse was steady, not racing. It felt like every nerve in my body had gone silent, focused only on the task ahead. I picked up my purse, straightened my dress, and walked down the hall, each click of my heels echoing like a countdown. My reflection in the gold-plated numbers on the doors looked different, sharper, colder. Someone who'd finally stopped asking for explanations. When I reached 308, I knocked. Once, firmly. The kind of knock that doesn't belong to a woman who doubts. The door opened, and there she was. Lily Moore, in a silk blouse, eyes widening as soon as she saw me. Behind her, Ethan's voice faltered mid-sentence. I smiled, not kindly. "Hi, Lily," I said softly. "I think you left this at my house." I reached into my purse and held up the bracelet. Gold, gleaming, guilty. Ethan's face drained of color. "Sophie, please," he started, but I cut him off before he could spin another lie. "Don't. You said it was mine, remember?" My voice didn't shake. It was almost tender, the way you talk to a dying thing. I turned the bracelet slowly in my hand, letting it catch the light. I just came to return what was never meant for me. And with that, I lifted my phone. Click. The sound sliced the silence clean in half. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Lily stood frozen in the doorway, her hand gripping the frame like it might hold her up. Ethan just stared at me, mouth open, searching for words that didn't exist. The silence was thick, almost holy, and I wanted to remember it exactly like this, the sound of truth settling in. I slipped the bracelet into Lily's hand and smiled, polite, like we were strangers sharing a brief, awkward encounter. "You can keep it," I said, my tone almost kind. "It suits you better." Ethan took a hesitant step forward, reaching for me, but I stepped back. The look in his eyes wasn't guilt. It was fear. Fear of the story I now held, of the proof I could unleash with one tap of my screen. "Don't," I whispered. "You've done enough." I turned before he could answer, heels clicking down that hallway like a drumbeat of finality. When the elevator doors closed behind me, I felt it, that deep, quiet release that comes when a wound finally stops bleeding. My hands were trembling, but not from pain, from power. The photo sat safe in my phone, glowing like a secret weapon. For once, he couldn't twist the truth. And as the elevator descended, I already knew what I'd do with it. The revenge wouldn't come from rage. It would come from precision. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the blinds, the kind that used to feel warm. Now it just illuminated the wreckage. My phone buzzed beside me, unread messages from Ethan. Apologies, excuses, the usual script. I didn't bother opening them. Instead, I scrolled to the photo I'd taken at the hotel. The image was perfect. His guilt frozen in time, her face pale as glass. Proof, not for my heart, but for justice. I drafted the first message carefully. No anger, no profanity, just precision. I attached the photo and sent it to Ethan's boss with a short caption. "Thought you'd want to know what your senior project manager was doing during Friday's work dinner." My finger hovered for only a second before pressing send. Then I posted the same photo to my social page, captioned simply, "When you lie to someone who already knows the truth." I watched the screen light up like a confession booth. For the rest of the day, I didn't check my notifications. I made tea, folded laundry, watered my plants. I wanted normalcy to wrap around me again, to feel the air move through the house without lies clinging to it. Hours later, when my phone rang again, it wasn't Ethan. It was silence on the other end of my thoughts. That kind of silence you earn when you finally stop pretending. It didn't take long. By evening, the fallout had already begun. My posts spread faster than I expected, shared, whispered, dissected. His company moved quickly. The photo made its way to the board. Ethan's title, his image, his reputation, all of it crumbled overnight. The man who once bragged about control had lost everything in the span of a few keystrokes. And I didn't feel sorry, not even for a second. 2 days later, he showed up at my door, disheveled, desperate, eyes bloodshot from sleeplessness or shame, maybe both. "Sophie, please," he said, voice breaking. "You didn't have to ruin me." I almost laughed. The irony was too sharp to ignore. "Ruin you?" I said softly. "You did that the moment you brought her into my bed." He reached out, but I stepped back. The distance between us felt sacred now, a boundary I'd finally built. For the first time, he seemed to really see me, not as his wife, not as his possession, but as something untouchable. "I made a mistake," he whispered, as if the word could erase everything. I met his eyes and felt nothing. No hate, no love, just clarity. "You made a choice," I said. My hand closed around the door handle, slow and steady. "And now, I'm making mine." I shut the door, not with anger, but finality. When the latch clicked, the silence that followed felt like air after a storm, heavy, clean, and strangely still. I leaned against the door, letting my breath steady. There was no satisfaction in watching him fall, only release. For years, I'd carried his lies like invisible chains, convincing myself that keeping peace was the same as keeping love. But as I stood there in the quiet, I realized something simple. Peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from truth. In the days that followed, I didn't look back. His name faded from my phone, his things from the closet, his shadow from the walls. The house began to sound different, lighter, freer, like it was finally exhaling with me. Every morning, I brewed coffee without wondering where he was. Every night, I slept without listening for the sound of his keys, and with each small act of solitude, I felt something new growing inside me, dignity. I didn't need to announce my revenge to the world. The photo, the job, the humiliation, those were only the surface. The real victory was quieter. It was knowing he could no longer reach me, no longer twist my reality into his convenience. I'd returned every lie he'd ever given me, neatly wrapped in truth. And now, the only thing left to do was live. Months later, life had found a new rhythm. Slower, softer mine. The house no longer echoed with someone else's footsteps, only the comforting sounds of my own. One afternoon, while walking past a jewelry store, something in the window caught my eye. A bracelet. Simple, elegant, understated. Not the kind that demands attention, the kind that feels like it belongs. I walked inside without thinking, drawn by something deeper than desire. The jeweler greeted me warmly. "Looking for something special?" she asked. I smiled. "Just something that feels right." My eyes stayed fixed on that bracelet. Thin silver, nothing ornate, but beautifully honest. "Would you like it engraved?" she asked, handing me the pen to fill in the form. I paused, then shook my head softly. "Just one letter," I said. "S." She smiled, unaware of what that small letter meant. Survival, self, sovereignty. When I stepped back into the sunlight, the metal gleamed against my wrist. It wasn't heavy like the last one. It felt like air, like forgiveness without forgetting. I raised my arm slightly, letting the light catch it. "Now this one's truly mine," I whispered. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't wearing a symbol of someone else's love. I was wearing a reminder of my own.